We begin, though, with the fight over the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government will take financial and legislative action to make it happen. Today, there was yet more opposition out of BC.
This pipeline and these tankers that are to traverse through our people's territories have not met our consent as a nation. The work that is being proposed by the Trudeau government, as well as the proponent Kinder Morgan, contravenes our rights as a people.
Indigenous groups and politicians are speaking out against Kinder Morgan's pipeline plans. The company appears to be getting cold feet and has now threatened to walk away from the project. Alberta, of course, wants to move forward. Ottawa says the project is in the country's national economic interest and necessary for getting our resources to markets other than the U.S. CBC's Margot McDermott is in Ottawa, where the dispute over the Trans Mountain pipeline is heating up. Margot, yesterday there was the pipeline summit between the Prime Minister and the Premiers of Alberta and BC. What's Ottawa's kind of next step in all of this?
Well, Peter, what we do know is that Ottawa is set to introduce legislation that will assert Ottawa's right, or the federal right, to get this pipeline built. Now, we do know that the federal government does have constitutional authority over energy projects like pipelines going from one province to another. But there's no appetite, nor is there any time for any kind of court reference to clarify this. So what the Prime Minister is talking about is actually bringing in legislation, they say this week, we don't have any timing on that yet, that would actually make sure that it's clear it has the power, and it makes sure that this pipeline gets built. So the Prime Minister has also instructed the Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, to start talks with the company Kinder Morgan. And essentially, sources are telling CBC is that the federal goal is to kind of de-risk any delay that might occur in this project, which is, of course, the biggest concern for the company. So, for example, if the BC government or if Indigenous groups delay the pipeline past May 31st, which is the day it's supposed to start construction, or around that time, there would be money to help Kinder Morgan kind of wait out that delay. Now, exactly how that's going to work and exactly what the feds are thinking about, they're being very coy about that, but they have not ruled out actually investing in the pipeline itself, very similar to what Alberta is actually talking about as well.
Now, we played a clip off the top of opposition really galvanizing in BC. This is sort of adding on to what we've already seen out of BC. What is your sense of how this is playing out in terms of those opposition groups coming together?
Well, it kind of what happened over the weekend with the summit with the Prime Minister, BC and Alberta premiers really kind of just added more fuel to the fire of the opposition to the pipeline in BC, especially in the area near Burnaby, where the pipeline would end and the tankers would carry oil to larger tankers waiting off the coast. So there's real concern over oil pipeline spills or oil spills there. So today we saw a joint press conference, as we saw at the beginning of the show, with local mayors, Indigenous groups, and the NDP MP for the area, and they're saying there's actually growing opposition. They also point out that the company still hasn't met all the federal conditions set when it was approved recently, or over a year ago, and it still hasn't met all the BC government's conditions that also have to be met before all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and construction starts. So they're saying it's still not a done deal. We also heard from Kennedy Stewart, who is the NDP MP for Burnaby South, and his riding, of course, would be affected by this pipeline, and he's accusing the Prime Minister of rushing into this for political reasons. So just take a quick listen to what he said today.
The Prime Minister is being reckless. By saying he will force this pipeline through British Columbia, he's disregarding his own process. He's disregarding the lack of consent, both from Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples in British Columbia. He's failing Canada, and he needs to take a step back, and he needs to make sure that he is doing what's right for all Canadians.
And Peter, it's probably an understatement to say that this issue over the Kinder Morgan pipeline and how does this government handle it is absolutely going to dominate the political scene here in Ottawa for months.
Indeed it will, and our show as well. CBC's Margot McDermott, thanks as always. To talk more about the politics and the business of pipelines, we're joined by Gwyn Morgan, founder and former CEO of Encana. He's in Victoria. And in Ottawa, we have John Manley, CEO of the Business Council of Canada. Mr. Manley, if I can, I'll start with you. There is so much in this that we don't know what the government will do in terms of investing or in terms of providing some kind of financing. More to the point, though, I don't think any of us have a real sense of what that would look like. Have you had time to get your head around what federal money in this project, what those terms would even begin to look like?
I have no information that you haven't seen, but I think what they're trying to get at here is that the risk cost on this project for Kinder Morgan has continually been going up. And with recent actions by the British Columbia government, I think it was not inappropriate for the company to say, you know, this is just getting, the risk factor in this is just getting beyond what we think we should manage and that we should put our investors at risk for. And so undoubtedly, Mr. Morneau's mandate is to try to find some way that he can offset that risk in some fashion, whether it's a financial contribution or some other means, just to begin to give the company some assurance that on a reasonable time frame, the money that they have set aside to do this project can be invested and can reap the benefits that are promised from it.
And Gwyn Morgan, that is all important, and keeping Kinder Morgan at the table, I think, is paramount here. But at the same time, it doesn't address any of the core problems that have delayed this project for months now. Do you think we are any closer to this pipeline getting built as a result of this proposed deal? I'm not sure if Gwyn can hear us. So, John, while we sort out his audio, let me put that back to you. Do you think we're any closer to a deal being completed as a result of this deal?
No, I don't necessarily think that that's the case. I don't think Kinder Morgan has given any response to the proposal.
Yes, I can hear now.
And therefore, I think we're going to need to wait and see. Whatever, this doesn't get to the core problem. And the core problem is, can a company look at the Canadian rules, figure out what it would take to comply with them, and have some reasonable expectation that within a predictable time frame, if they comply with the rules, they can expect the project to go forward. That's the question that this whole project has posed to international investors.
Okay, let me try to put that exact question to Gwyn then. Can a company look at the regulatory environment in Canada and know whether it will be able to proceed with a project or not? And does this weekend summit advance the ball at all further down the court?
Well, we're talking about new projects. Clearly, the answer is no. The new federal regulations and procedures that demolish the internationally respected National Energy Board are only going to make it more difficult. And so the chance of anyone starting a new project under this government and these rules is virtually nil. So this is the only game in town. And, you know, it's interesting. I call it the saga of the three pipeline projects. The first one was basically destroyed by Prime Minister Trudeau when he said that the Great Bear Rainforest couldn't be crossed, even though it hadn't been invented until during the whole process for the approval of the Northern Gateway. And then we lost the Trans-Canada Pipeline Energy East project, which was a real nation builder, because we would have had Canadian oil flowing from coast to coast and moved all those foreign tankers, and we'd have access to tidewater. But that was rejected because of Quebec politics. So, you know, sometimes when you make political decisions, you end up with eliminating all your options, and now there's only one, and we're having a lot of trouble with that one.
Gwyn, if we're hearing that Bill Morneau, I mean, we know that Bill Morneau is going back and forth between Ottawa and BC and Alberta. We presume he's going to be going down to Houston to talk to Kinder Morgan themselves. You've run a pipeline. You've run one of these companies, sorry. If a guy like Bill Morneau was to walk into your office and say, okay, here's what we propose from the federal government. We either give you some financial incentives to stick around while there might be some delays, or maybe some kind of an investment from the federal government into the pipeline project itself. What is your reaction in that boardroom?
Well, first of all, I don't see the connection between investing by the governments, either BC or either Alberta or the federal government. on what's happening on the ground here in British Columbia, the reality is that there's such fervent opposition, even though it's, it certainly is going to be the safest tanker traffic in the whole world. But nevertheless, that doesn't matter. The facts don't matter at this point to those protesters. And so if I'm Kinder Morgan, I'm worried about all of those protests on the ground, and who's going to protect our people and our project and get that built. And I don't see the ownership having anything to do with that.
John Manley, one of the lines that Bill Morneau says he's going to, that we're hearing Bill Morneau is there to do, is to de-risk any delay. How do you imagine, like, I'll give you one example. What happens if indeed the feds invest in this or they put some kind of money in, and then at the end of the day, the project ends up dying anyways? Is that lost money? Do we own a bit of this pipeline or a percentage of the company that owns the pipeline? How do you figure out where those public dollars go?
I don't know. I don't have a clue what they're going to propose. I think that they're addressing the right issue, which is the risk and the time value of money. But how that would be structured, whether there would be some kind of buyout or compensation package to Kinder Morgan if the project couldn't proceed, I think we'll just have to wait and see what's proposed. I don't know of any business that I deal with that would welcome a government investment in their project. I think they'd much rather that the rules be clear and understandable and that they can comply with them and do their project. Taking on government investment, the scrutiny that comes with that with respect to taxpayers' money and potential participation by people designated by the government are just problems for a business, not things that they would welcome.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That doesn't even mention the unintended consequences of all this, like Bombardier.
Exactly.
But we'll leave it there for now. John Manley, CEO of the Business Council of Canada, and Gwyn Morgan, founder and former CEO of NCANA. Thanks to you both.